Adrian, I had a question for you. One of the components of the PREPARE guidelines is the harm versus benefit analysis. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and tell us a little bit about how you might start thinking about that, given that we're so subjective, and how do you quantify harm versus benefit?
Yeah, it's really an impossible issue anyway, because we're talking about physical specific harms that we know are going to happen to specific individuals on the one hand, and on the other hand, possible benefits to others, mainly the human race, somewhere down the line in a few years' time. So we're trying to compare apples and pears, which is, so I think probably the most important component of that is the severity classification, trying to really identify the harms that the animals are going to likely to be subjected to. So there are a lot of very good systems with suggestions for classification of specific procedures on animals into the various categories of severity which we have here in Europe: mild, moderate, and severe. And that, I think, is probably the easiest part of the harm benefit analysis. But there have been some very nice papers produced by working groups on this, which you'll find references to on our website. So I think, as I mentioned in my talk, the contingent suffering is something that we can do a lot with to reduce the total burden on the animals. The things that scientists maybe aren't quite so aware of, the stress of bringing the animals in from abroad and reorganizing them into new social groups, giving them new feed and water, and being handled by strangers. All these items are also really important to identify, not just the specific harms that the procedures themselves are going to inflict on the animals. We can do a lot about that, which is why we really like to get this dialogue between the facility and the scientists from day one, so that before the big decisions are made, that we can discuss all these issues which they may never end up reporting, but which will affect the validity of the data coming out of the experiment. And as I'll be saying tomorrow when I talk about culture of care, we think it's really important to bring the technicians in to that first meeting. I mean, so many times I've heard scientists go to a facility, they ask to speak to the manager, and they sit down in their office behind closed doors, and the scientist says, I think we're working on a really good cure for Alzheimer's, but it's going to involve these harmful procedures on the animals. The technicians don't get to hear that. They just get to hear a few weeks later that these animals are going to be subjected to these harmful procedures. They haven't got the big picture, and they're less motivated. They're not as creative in the experiment. They're not as good at contributing with refinements to the experiment. So involve everybody from the word go, and go through the items on the checklist. And we almost regret that we put check boxes on it, tick boxes, because it's not something that we want to force down through people's throats. It's not, just another piece of paper that has to be signed off. It's more a voluntary suggestion to topics that the scientists should consider at any rate, because they may influence the robustness and the validity of the experiment. So bring it on board as a voluntary exercise and say, well, actually, we have examples of the way in which these issues can affect your experiment. Maybe we ought to be talking about it now before it's too late. And if I can just say something about the issue of how we get a change in culture. I'm so long in the tooth now that I've been teaching researchers 35 years ago who really didn't understand the 3R principle at all, and we really had to work hard to convince them of the importance of this concept. Now we've got a new generation who accept this, in my experience, far more readily. And if we can use the opportunity of getting all these things on board on the courses that they have to take anyway before they're allowed to do in vivo work. So we're introducing it that way and giving them examples of, there's a reason why you have to consider blood sampling, for example, because how much blood is there in that mouse? How much can you take out before it starts causing important physiological changes? And get them to realize there is a connection here. It's not just a checklist, it's actually it's good advice on how to refine the experiments so you don't get artifacts caused by the procedures.
That's great. Thank you all so much. We've come to the end of our questions and to the end of our time today. Camilla or Catherine, do you have anything else to add?
Oh, just that the link for tomorrow will be coming in on your emails tonight, pretty shortly. If you don't receive it, just get in touch with us. And thank you for coming or watching.
I actually have a comment to make. Unfortunately, I cannot write in the Q&A box. So I was just wanted to say to Adrian that I'm very thankful for the PREPARE guidelines, because they are really focusing on the welfare and well-being of those animals. And obviously, as he made very clear, it's too late, when it comes to reporting. However, let's see how the AWIC guidelines will improve the reporting situation, because there I have to say I'm a little bit sad that some of the very important issues such as refinement and also translatability were moved to the recommended items. I can understand the sentiment. I can understand that you don't want to overwhelm people, you don't want to overwhelm the journals, but in the end of the day, you should be able to deliver this information. I don't think we should make it that easy for people, and we are all concerned with the welfare of those animals we use in the research, and I think that's why I'm very hopeful that the PREPARE guidelines will really be used widely. And just a comment, because Dr. Silberberg mentioned that we have at Johns Hopkins a center that he was talking about, the R3 Center for Innovation in Science Education, and the director is Dr. Gundula Bosch. It's really great that she's doing that. It's called it's bringing the PhD back into it's bringing the philosophy back into the PhD. The idea is to make students think critically about everything they do and assess what they are doing, and just don't do what's done in their lab. So that's, I think, very important to make a change and implement new things that are not the norm at the moment. And just out of, if anybody's interested, we have a course on the 3 R's and then rigor and reproducibility. And we still hope that we can bring parts of it on Coursera for free. I put the link in the chat. We discuss all the shortcomings of animal models as well as non-animal approaches. And one important thing that wasn't highlighted by or isn't highlighted by our symposium, but it was touched upon, is that it's very important that we know how to search the literature. Adrian actually mentioned that in the beginning you should look for replacements. So that's also a big focus. Yeah, so thanks a lot, everybody, for attending. It's been a long day, especially when you think about you have to be on a computer. And thanks to our speakers. It's amazing that you spend your time and help us educate and learn. And yeah, thank you very much for everything. And I see all the attendees again tomorrow. And of course, the speakers from today are invited to join us tomorrow as well. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.